Hello, friends and fellow seekers. Welcome back to the Law of One Spiritual Advice podcast. My name is Elle, and today we're going to be speaking about service in its various forms, specifically the difference between service to others and service to self. And that the common question that comes up is, am I selfish? Am I a service to self individual? I want to be service to others, but when I'm maybe taking care of myself, is that selfish? Am I polarizing negatively? And where do I draw the line between people pleasing and serving others? And where does my intention lay in all of this? And then if you stick around to the end, we're going to get a little bit high level on you and go into some heavy metaphysics as to different chakras and areas that you would be inhabiting as you attempt to either maybe sort of fall into the self or, move forward into other selves. So stick around for that. But we're going to get right into it here with session 7.17 from the raw material. Raw says, those who seek to serve the self are seen by the law of one as precisely the same as those who seek to serve others. For are all not one? To serve yourself and to serve other is a dual method of saying the same thing, if you can understand the essence of the law of one. End of quote. And so you can see by this maybe that there is only service in its various forms. There is almost no distinguishing the difference between the service to others and service to self, except through intention. And so intention is what is going to be distinguishing the difference between everything that you would do in life. You could do something which is maybe from a self-care perspective, but if you are doing it to maybe keep yourself healthy and keep the longevity of your mind-body-spirit complex going so that you can then serve longer into the future, then as a simple taking care of yourself can also be seen as a positive thing. It doesn't have to be that self-care or doing something for yourself is a negative trait, because you do it in glory to all. You do it in glory to the service to all, to the one, to the creator, to other-selves, to yourself, because you are also part of that creator. But I do find that a lot of people get tripped up on this idea that anytime that they may be acting a little bit selfishly, that they are being selfish. And don't get me wrong, that is a possibility, because our intentions are never completely pure. Mine are not. I'm sure yours are not either. So you do have to sort of call yourself on your BS from time to time. But the important part is that you're aware that the intention is where the power lays, I suppose is what you could say. So I'm going to read you another question here from session 7.15, and they're just going to go into a little bit more about how the creator neither blinks at the dark or the light. They essentially allow the free will use of energy as others see fit. But the important part in this quote is that you'll notice that they say that service to others includes service to self, whereas service to self is sort of an implicit thing where they exclude, right? And whereas service to others is going to include service to self, right? Whereas service to self, just service to self. Service to others is service to others and service to self. It's almost like the paradox is solved in the service to others category, because as one seeks to serve the self is also serving others, and vice versa. But anyways, this is sort of the idea as what you can get from this quote. Before I read it to you, maybe I should have done it the other way around. Session 7.15, Raw states, the law of one blinks neither at the light or the darkness, but is available for service to others and service to self. However, service to others results in service to self, thus preserving and further harmonizing the distortions of those entities seeking intelligent infinity through these disciplines. Those seeking intelligent infinity through the use of service to self create the same amount of power, but as we have said, have constant difficulty because of the concept of separation, which is implicit in the manifestations of the service to self, which involve power over others. This weakens and eventually disintegrates the energy collected by such mind-body-spirit complexes. End of quote. So just to reiterate what I was trying to get at there is that in the service to others, you see others and the self as the creator, and therefore there is no real difference between the others and the self. It doesn't matter whether you serve yourself or you serve somebody else. You have the good intentions, I suppose, to do well. And then if you're in the service to self category, what you would be more concerned with is basically manipulating and coercing other people into your thoughts and into your ideas, into your type of perception, to convince them to serve you, and in other words, to serve themselves, but ultimately to serve you. And it's basically the service to self entity who is manipulating and enslaving and coercing others into the service to self polarity, which gives them more power. And as it's stated here, there's service to others and the service to self entities all kind of have the same power in that the creator neither blinks at the dark or the light. They allow the free choice of entities to choose as they please amongst the energies. And why is that? why would the creator be so evil as to let an evil entity choose to do evil, right? Like, it's a pretty fair question, to be honest with you. And the answer is quite simple. It's just the nature of experience. Without the choice, there would be no choice, right? Without you having the choice to do, in quotations, right, good or evil, there wouldn't be any reason for this existence. There would just be what is, and everything would be perfect all the time, and there wouldn't be free will choice. And so the free will choice is basically that. Do you wish to serve others as they are the creator and as they are you? Or do you wish to serve the self as if the self is sort of the primary creator and that all should serve the self as the creator? And those are your two options basically in this service to others or service to self intentions. So this is going to lead nicely into the next section, because it's about intentions, about people pleasing. So how do you know whether you are just people pleasing, in other words, maybe just telling somebody what they want to hear, versus being honest and actually serving them? Like, how do you know that you're actually being of service to somebody versus just, as they mentioned in the quotes here, giving them total admiration? I kind of think of this like a celebrity, right? If you have a celebrity or somebody who's famous and powerful, they probably have people around them who constantly tell them how awesome they are and how amazing they are and compliment them, and they never maybe give them a critical thought, a critical eye, a critical thing, because they don't want to offend that person. But that's the idea of this quote that I'm about to read you, is pretty much you need to, in order to serve others, you need to be honest with them. And what serves somebody isn't always what makes them happy. It's not always what sounds good, right? It's sometimes to serve somebody is to put yourself in their shoes and to think, what might be the best outcome for this person. So in session 101.8, Ra mentions, the entity which is given constant and unremittent approval by those surrounding it suffers from the loss of the mirroring effect of those which reflect truthfully rather than unquestioningly. This is not a suggestion to reinstate judgment, but merely a suggestion for all those supporting instruments, that is, support be harmonious, share in love, joy, and thanksgiving, but find love within truth, for each instrument benefits from this support more than from the total admiration which overcomes discrimination. End of quote. So they did add a whole bunch of extra fancy words in there, and if I'm just to give you my interpretation of that paragraph, it would basically, they're saying that, yes, you need to be honest with somebody, hold up the mirror in front of them when it seems appropriate, not necessarily to judge them, but to support them, right? It says that it's not necessarily that you're needing to judge and tell someone how much of a bad person they are. It's that you're doing whatever you're doing because it comes from a place of harmony. You want to share in love, joy, thanksgiving, in harmony. It's you want to find love within truth and truth within love, vice versa. You don't want to just be admiring every wonderful thing about somebody while they also have a lot of stuff to work on themselves, right? So it's more about, depending on your relationship with somebody, it's appropriate or not appropriate to give certain levels of feedback to. And so that is up to your discrimination, but depending on what level of relationship you are with people, it requires more honesty or, less. Like I would say, the closer you are to someone, the more honest you should be with them, because you honestly seek to serve them, hopefully, right? And then backing up a little bit, we're going to be talking about service to self requires the ever-expanding use of other people's energies, which eventually leads the service to self entity to disintegrate themselves or their energies. So in session 11.31, to serve the self is to serve all. The service of self, when seen in this perspective, requires an ever-expanding use of the energies of others for the manipulation to the benefit of the self with distortion towards power. End of quote. That also gets a little confusing, but the idea there is that it requires the ever-expanding use of energies of others. And why might that be? And I'm going to link this into free will. This is because the universe runs on free will. If somebody is going to be in service to others, they're basically attempting to do their best within the constraints of free will, you might say, I guess. But basically, we want to put free will as the most paramount thing. And what the service to self perspective does is attempts to manipulate the other person's free will to use their own free will against them. At least that's the way that I've seen to notice these things. And they do it to gain more power for themselves. So now you can contrast that with the service to others polarity, in which one is trying to respect the free will of others over all other types of things, and you may get a better view of what these types of services are. So in session 73.12, the questioner is asking about evangelists. So this is common in our culture where we have people who are of the religious slant or whatever, and they have a dogma. And a dogma basically states from, a Bible or whatever your favorite religious text is that something must be done a certain way. If you don't do this, you don't go to heaven, right? I'm sure you've heard it, right? You don't accept Jesus, you're not going to heaven. And so right there, in my opinion, that is sort of messing with other people's free will, and that it's not really giving them a choice. It's just trying to say like, hey, you do this or you'll suffer, right? Whereas what the law of one and what I'm trying to give you here is that, yes, obviously I'm kind of giving this a service to others slant, but in order for you to have a free choice, you must understand what service to self is and service to others is, meaning that I offer you that choice often in when I'm speaking, not as to say like one is more obvious than the other, but one, in my opinion, respects free will a little bit more than another. And so, there is hints as to which one we're getting at here. So in session 73.12, they talk about the evangelists who are using that distorted dogma against other-selves, even though they may have good intentions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have become negative or become evil. It just means that they're not necessarily as pure, and they're sort of blocking a lot of the magical nature of the workings that they could otherwise be having with people, unless this person seems to freely desire it. So I'm getting off track here. Session 73.12, the questioner asks, I would then assume that the many so-called evangelists which we have in our society at present, many have great desire and great will, and possibly great polarity. It seems to me that in some cases that there is a lack of information or awareness that creates a less than effective working in the magical sense. Am I correct in this analysis? And Ra answers, I am Ra. You are partially correct. In examining the polarity of a service to others working, the free will must be seen as paramount. Those entities of which you speak are attempting to generate positive changes in consciousness while abridging free will. This causes the blockage of the magical nature of the working, except in those cases wherein an entity freely desires to accept the working of the evangelist as you have called it. End of quote. So now if you can see where you contrasted the previous service to self entity's perspective with a service to others perspective who may be acting in a slightly negative way, you can see how that doesn't necessarily make them negative, right? It doesn't make somebody evil or negative just because they're not operating perfectly. But it's still, the important part about this quote is this part. In examining the polarity of a service to others working, the free will must be seen as paramount. Because they're attempting to generate positive changes in consciousness while they abridge free will, which unfortunately, it even comes with some karmic things to my understanding. The more that you attempt to force your opinion on others in a non-free way, in a way that doesn't allow them to come to the conclusions that they will come to freely, you're sort of forcing them into an opinion or a side, and that's going to sort of create some karmic bonds with you, I suppose. And if you want to go down a real intense level, that's in fact what the negative entities do, to my understanding, is that they use that trickery. They use trickery against other people to have them use their free will against themselves, so that they're not totally caught up in the karmic bonds of the restitution of that free will choice, if that made any sense to you. Free will is a tricky thing, but you can see that in the service to others entities, such as the evangelist who wants to do well, right? They're still abridging the free will. It causes some issues in that it blocks the magical nature of what they're trying to do. In other words, it's not really going to do anything unless maybe the entity that they're working with really freely desires to accept the working of that person, and they kind of feel that it is true and that their free will isn't being completely abridged, then the magic works. But for an entity who hasn't fully made the choice on their own, within their head, to be sort of coerced into a certain opinion isn't a fully pure service to others type of perspective, in that it's not attempting to respect the free will of that individual, and the free will of the individual is sort of the number one thing to consider when attempting to serve others always. And then you may ask, what is proper? What is a proper way to serve? What shall I do to people? And the thing is that I can't really answer that either, because it's going to be coming up to your discernment in the moment as to what you think is sort of best in terms of you putting yourself in someone else's shoes and just trying to think of what might be best. So in 18.6, they kind of go into this about what is proper for one is not proper for another. You want to attempt to put yourself in other people's shoes, do what you surmise might be considered a service, and that doesn't always mean that it has to be good feelings and wonderful, magical things that are going to come from it. Service is a delicate art, and you have to use a balance of your mind and intuition, or maybe even a balance of your logic and your heart, so that you are not falling too far into a wisdom category or into an over-loving category and having people take advantage of your love, right? You sort of have to look at each situation as it comes to you as a new situation. We can't judge something before it happens, and so it comes before our view, and we attempt our best to use our logic and our hearts and serve the other and point the direction in service to others and open the heart and try to help them out or do whatever it is that you think needs to be done. So in 18.6, Raw states, what would be an improper distortion with one entity is proper with another. We can suggest an attempt to become aware of the other self as self, and thus do that action which is needed by other self, understanding from the other self's intelligence and awareness. In many cases, this does not involve the breaking of the distortion of free will into a distortion of fragmentation called infringement. However, it is a delicate matter to be of service, and compassion, sensitivity, and an ability to empathize are helpful in avoiding the distortions of man-made intelligence and awareness. End of quote. Highlighting here, once again, right, become aware of the other self as the self, and do that action which is needed by other self, understanding from the other self's intelligence and awareness. That last little part there, intelligence and awareness, that sticks out to me. Why? Because not everyone is at the same level of intelligence or awareness that you are. And so you may know 1,000 million wonderful things, and that might not be where that other person is at. And so maybe that they're at the beginning of a more simpler path, and so you may just want to start with some very basics. You may not want to lay down the unity of the universe on them in one go when they're still sort of just figuring out, like, what is love? if that may sort of make sense to you. So yeah, each of these things isn't a black and white type situation. It is a lot about intention and a lot about just your discernment in the moment. Just have to trust yourself. Always inspect your intentions, kind of call yourself on some of the BS ego tricks that we like to play on ourselves sometimes, right? Just to open your heart and make sure that it's coming from a more pure place, these thoughts and intentions. And what more can you do, my friend? But this does also bring up that sometimes, right, when I'm saying there's service to others and service to self, and it comes down to intention, and I mentioned the ego tricks. So the ego can be a tricky thing in that it sometimes will convince us that we are doing a sort of service to others thing, when in reality it's a service to self type thing. And so what do I mean by that? Well, sometimes you want to give someone like a hard truth. Remember how I was talking earlier? You want to be honest with somebody, right? Well, I'm going to be honest with this person. I'm going to tell them the truth. They need to hear it. So when is it appropriate to invoke, let's say, wisdom and to deliver that heart wisdom? And when is it maybe not appropriate to do that? And although I'm going to apply this quote fairly creatively, I'm going to read it to you, and then you'll see maybe what I'm getting at. So in session 42.7, Ra mentions, to a mind-body-spirit complex which is starving, the appropriate response is the feeding of the body. You may extrapolate from this. In other words, if someone is hungry, feed them, right? It's not a time to invoke wisdom over your heart, like, oh, I need to take care of myself. Like, let's say you have a sandwich, right? You have a sandwich and you are walking down the street and you notice somebody and they're sitting there and they're extremely hungry. And, it's not like you're a normal person who's begging for money or something. You actually have somebody there who's just straight up asking for food, okay? So would you then look at yourself and say, oh, this is my sandwich. I need to eat this because, I need my sustenance for the day and I need to take care of myself. blah 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 blah. Well, from the Bible, right? Break that sandwich in half. You can give it to half to you, half to them, and that may be something that you want to do. Another choice would be that, hey, you know what? Well, this is a small sacrifice. For me, I could probably do without this sandwich right now. I had breakfast. I have lunch on the daily. Skipping one lunch isn't going to do much. How about we hand this on over to the person, the entire thing? And then I suppose the service to self perspective, we should probably throw that one in there just for optimal understanding. And that would be that this is my sandwich. I worked for this sandwich. That person doesn't deserve anything. That person deserves what they deserve. So they should starve and think about how starving they are, and maybe they'll do something about it. and the thing is that, within the proper perspective, that service to self attitude isn't necessarily a service to self attitude. If maybe you walk down the street every single day and you see the same person every day and they're always begging, and they don't necessarily have like a reason, and there's nothing that's catalyzing them to better themselves, etc., you may not eventually want to feed them. Or you may want to attempt to serve in another way. But do you get what I'm getting at? It's basically that, like, sometimes we think we need to be wise and say, oh, I need to preserve some of my wealth because I can't help this other person right now. And you may be right, but the thing is like the nature and the magic of the universe has a lot to do with freely giving. And the more that you can sort of freely give of yourself, the more that things can come to you as well. And the gifts can flow through you. So there is no real one answer to this, but the idea is that sometimes we like to play ego tricks on ourselves, and our ego can be very tricky and say, hey, we're just taking care of ourselves here. We're not being selfish. When in fact, it is sometimes a good time to invoke the heart over the wisdom and just do what the person needs, because they are at such a low bottom level that there's nothing more that you can do but just, give them the bare minimum. Sorry for making that all very convoluted, but we're going to be making it even more convoluted. So bear with me. This is what I was talking about at the beginning, how some people are reverting back into the self instead of moving forward into other selves. And this is going to get a little complicated because we're going to talk about chakras, but I'll try to make it easy if you don't know much about chakras. Okay, so energy flows through you, and it's almost like the energy that flows through you flows through filters of perceptions, and those are maybe your chakras. And so each chakra has to do with the first one. It goes through them sequentially. So it starts with the first one, has to do with survival. How will I react to this situation in terms of survival, in terms of literally just living, because you can't do anything if you're not alive, right? So then your next filter of perception, the next chakra, is the orange chakra, the second one, which, pay attention to this because this is what we're going to be talking about. And that is the self. It is, who am I? What am I? What is this self? Right? What is this self in the creation? It's sort of like similar to the animal consciousness of an animal. It's like the very most simple self-consciousness of yourself. Okay? Then you have your next chakra, which is the yellow one, the third one, which has more to do with the social aspects of yourself, with community, with other selves. So it is about, right, the first one is about survival, the second one is about yourself, how do you relate this to yourself, and then the third one is, how do I relate this to myself and other selves, such as people in your life, people at work, people in culture, people in society, people in sports, etc., the social aspects of yourself. And then you move up into the heart, into the freely giving and the love and understanding and all that wonderful sort of free, open, intentional service to others attitudes. But what we're going to be focusing on in this quote is that we are in the third density. So most people are going to have sort of their first three chakras in basic activation, okay? But we also right now have the fourth density coming, which is like what we're about to graduate into. But I understand it that like the fourth density is sort of overlaid over top of the third density, which we inhabit right now. In other words, the fourth density calls us forward. The fourth density energies are here now, and they beckon us to resonate with them and to manifest them. And as more of that energy penetrates our third density, the fourth density energies, which sort of beckon us forward towards the next density, what can happen is that, yes, to those who embrace those energies, who embrace love and understanding and service to others and things of that nature, are going to probably do well. And they're going to be moving then from the third chakra up into the fourth chakra, as is sort of intended. But what some people do here in our third density is that the fourth density light that is interpenetrating this third density right now, it's almost like the people are scared of it. It's like instead of them grasping the energy and moving up into that fourth chakra, into that fourth density, they actually get pushed back down into the self. It's almost as if it scares them and it pulls them out of balance and pushes them back into self, because the community and all that stuff freaks them out, or whatever it is. It can even just be, in my understanding, like anxiousness, in that I don't know what's going on, and so just sort of revert into myself, and I'm not going to talk to anyone, and I'm just going to be alone on my computer or my cell phone all day, and that'll be it. And that's reverting into orange ray. That's going from your social aspects of being sort of healthily up in your third chakra and interacting with this world, or, going back into the self and just sort of becoming like a homebody and not interacting with anyone. And the beauty is that when you do interact with other peoples and try to get yourself into community and into social aspects, you bring that energy back up into the third chakra, which is going to then harmonize your being. It's going to make your perceptions more healthy, because they're going to be mirrored off of other selves who are going to give you feedback on your vibration. And basically it's going to, as they state, regularize your personal vibratory rate so that you maintain balance. So in session 41.14, the raw answers: in third density at this time, those clinging to orange ray have a much more complex system of distortions through which orange ray is manifested. This is somewhat complicated. We shall endeavor to simplify. The appropriate true color for third density is, as you have ascertained, yellow. However, the influences of true color green acting upon yellow ray entities have caused many entities to revert to the consideration of self rather than stepping forward into consideration of other self or green ray. This may not be seen to be of a negatively polarized nature, as the negatively polarized entity is working very intensively with the deepest manifestations of yellow ray group energies, especially with the manipulation of other self for service to self. Those reverting to orange ray, and we may add these are many upon your plane at this time, are those who feel the vibrations of true color green and therefore respond by rejecting governmental and societal activities as such and seek once more the self. However, not having developed the yellow ray properly so that it balances the personal vibratory rates of the entity then is faced with the task of further activation and balancing of the self in relation to the self, thus the orange ray manifestations at this space-time nexus. Thus, true color orange is that which it is, without difference. However, the manifestations of this or any ray may be seen to be most various depending upon the vibratory levels and balances or mind-body-spirit complexes which are expressing these energies. End of quote. So I told you it was going to get really intense, didn't I? But I think I've already explained it pretty decently. The only thing I'd want to add was that what I was talking about before is mostly if you're a service to others polarity, do you have this potential to sort of get pushed back from the society and pushed back from the heart chakra down into the lower self. And I guess that's just basically a warning that I would like to tell you, because I am prone to it, as most of us are. But the solution is to put yourself out there, my friends. Do not get so anxious and self-worried about the self that you are worried to put yourself out there and express yourself. No one is perfect, and no one completely knows what they're doing. We can often put ourselves out there and be rejected by others, and that causes us to once again, revert back to the self and reject the outside societies and the outside things that we seem to not agree with. And you don't, like it says here, right? We respond by rejecting governmental and societal activities. I do that myself. I'm very much am rejecting a lot of governmental and societal activities at the moment, as I feel that I am not in resonance with them. So what do? Do I revert back into myself and just stay within my echo chambers. No, I try my best not to do that. I try my best to at least interact with others in my own type of community. It doesn't matter that I don't have to be part of the main type of community in society that, you see on TV. You can create your own community, and it doesn't even have to be a community. It's just mostly about entering into that third chakra of other selves, which deals with other selves, and having some type of social interaction, whether that just be with your family or friends or any kind of outside activity which involves other selves. Any type of involvement with other selves will help to regularize your being and to mirror things back and forth between you and other selves, and that will regularize your personal vibratory rate to help you maintain balance. In other words, it helps you avoid distortions. The more that you go within yourself and you don't have any feedback from others, the more that a distortion, it's like a seed. It'll grow within you, and it can't be fixed because, well, it can be fixed and it will eventually, but it can be fixed maybe a lot sooner when you have other people's perspectives and opinions to bounce thoughts back and forth off of, and you can have sort of other people make you second guess certain things that you're doing, and second guess maybe the intentions behind why you're doing what you're doing, and make better decisions. And that's not to say that everybody else has wonderful advice to give you either. Some advice can be terrible, so take that with a word of caution. But the deal is that yes, as you interact with other selves, they can help you to not get lost off within yourself, right? We all know that mental health is a big issue right now. And like they state here, there are many on our plane like this at this time. And to me, that's what it is. It's that the energies of love and understanding are sort of coming into this earth and beckoning us forward. And the more that people try to interact with society and they become rejected or whatever it is that happens with society that they don't like, they say, screw that. And I'm just going to deal with myself, the hell with all of you. I'm just going to deal with me. And that's okay. Temporarily, you should do that. In fact, I could find you a quote in the material which states that that's a healthy thing just for a moment in time, so that you can disconnect from other selves. You can disconnect from the personality, the husks of other selves, so that you can then better see through the husk to the seed of the heart of them. And once again, right, then that's going to tie it into the very beginning about the intentions about why you do anything. You may disconnect from society and go off into the forest to find yourself, and you may do that so that you may be a better lover and a better understander, and that when you then go back into society and interact with it, it maybe isn't so frustrating, right? So it's all about the intention with why you do things and how you do things. And I guess that is the main importance that I would like to bring to your attention with this entire podcast about service to others and service to self. Most likely, people, if they're even listening to this, are going to be on the service to others path, because you probably wouldn't be so concerned about free will and all this fancy stuff if you're on this service to self path. So my friend, if you are thinking that you are on that service to others path, then all you really need to do is just inspect your intentions in everything you do. Attempt to not be a total admirer of everyone that you see, and that just thinking that you need to only be giving love light, oh, love light, rainbows and happiness. No, to serve others is to sometimes give them a critical thought, a helpful thought. It doesn't have to be rude. It doesn't have to be too harsh. It should still come from a place of love and harmony, but it's possible. And that's it. It's all about your intention. And so if I could just leave you with one final quote here, I'm going to leave you with session 55.2, in which Ross states, "There is no magic greater than honest distortion towards love." End of quote. And so with that, you need to not be so concerned with how you serve, whether you're thinking this is selfish, is it not selfish? Mostly you just have an honest distortion towards love. You honestly want to do well and to serve well. Then just use your mind and your intuition and help it point you in that direction, and whatever happens will happen. And if mistakes are made, well, you will regroup and try again, and all will be well, as all is always well. And so, my friends, thank you so much for listening. If you like the podcast, please give it a like. Feel free to leave a comment. Make sure you subscribe if you want to hear more of this in the future. And as I seek to freely give all of this information of myself, I do have to admit that I need a little bit of sustenance and help help in that department, as this is not completely free for me. I have to pay for podcasts and websites and things of that nature. So if you would like to support these efforts and find value in what I do, you could please visit theoneinfinitecreator.com and scroll down to the support section, and you can support me directly, one-time PayPal, or sign up for a monthly Patreon thing that also helps me build a future in this area. So thank you guys that do, and if you can't, that's also no problem as well. I honestly just want to serve. I just hope that you got something from this, and so please feel free to take what resonates and leave the rest. And so, my friends, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care. I love you. Bye.